or if I'm a little scatterbrained. Anyway, so today I'm going to show you guys how to transfer onto your portfolio. Please don't start this step until I have actually replied to your Canvas submission that you have approval on your drawing, okay? But I want to get this so you guys know where the next step is going, because I think most of you probably have a little bit of tweaking still to do. So don't do this unless you're really sure you're on your final. So you at this point should have, you know, you should have multiples of your logo that have been colored, that have been worked out, and that are 5 inches by 7 inches. So that 5 by 7 logo needs to get transferred onto this. But first we need places to put it. So the first thing we're going to do is actually, I'm going to show you how to divide up the back of your portfolio. My AP boys who've done this before, I apologize. This is going to be easier than previous years because they don't have 24-inch rulers. It's ginger ale, I'm just saying. It's really, really good ginger ale. All right, so you have to choose 3 spots on the back of your portfolio where this can go. That's the goal here. So remember how I told you how to draw straight lines and stuff like that? They also need to be on the back and straight. Now, if you wanted to come up with some wild idea where they were at an angle, I'd be willing to entertain it with the right set of measurements, but you'd have to do a lot of proof for me to let you want to do that. So typically, when we put these on the back of a portfolio when we're in class, I actually have you divide the entire back of this thing up into a grid, and then you just put them in grid spots. But obviously, you guys don't all have a 24-inch ruler, so I can't ask you to do that. So I'm going to have you choose 3 spots on the back that you think you might want it. And then we're going to measure and get those at least generally pretty even onto the back. So in order to do this, first we have to figure out where my 5 by 7 logo is going. So I actually need something I'm just going to use as a logo. I'm going to use a card just because I've got one. And this is about 5 by 7. So let's say I want one logo here. And so in this case, my logo is a vertical format. I want one logo here, and one here. Oh, there's Jack. All right, mark him as present. All right. Okay, so I actually might adjust that. So I'm just going to use this kind of so you can use even a pull-out copy of yours if you wanted to, like, let's say you decide you really want one that's centered. And I don't know, maybe one up here and one over here, or one here, one centered, one here. So you can choose any place that you want it to be on here. If you really wanted to do something crazy, like have it at an angle like that went across, you'd have to do quite a bit of proof for me to be able to do that, but I would be willing to entertain it. But just as a start, I'm going to say I really like the idea of one there, and one there, I think. So first things first, what I want you to do is so you can use just a little piece of paper for this if you want, just so you can kind of gauge where it's going to be. I want you to make sure that all of them are equal distances from the edges of the portfolio when you put them on. I mean, obviously if it's in the middle here, but like if you're putting one on the left and one on the right, you want them to have the same border size. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, how in the world do I do this? Really help if I had a pencil. But there we are. Okay, oh no, that one's not sharpened. That's not helpful to me at all. All right. So looking at this, some of this is going to require some math. I'm not going to lie to you. So just so you guys have the dimensions of this portfolio handy, it is 17 inches by 22 inches. And again, we're going to assume that these machined edges are straight. So how big is this card? This card is in fact 5 by 7. I'm amazing. I didn't even really plan that, but it is 5 by 7. So just scooting this dude around here. So if I wanted it to go in this direction, if I wanted this centered, right? So if we're looking at dimensions on a portfolio, please guys stop me if any of this feels crazy or unclear, okay? So if I have dimensions of a portfolio like this, so this side is 17 and this side is 22, and I have a landscape format object that is 7 inches long, and I want to center 2 of them and put them all on here. So that means it's going to go 7 inches, 7 inches, and I want all of these gaps to be the same size. How do you think I'd do that?
You use a ruler as you do it?
Partially, but so if I take the measurement of 17 and I subtract 14 inches, so I subtract the height of 2 of these, that leaves me with 3 inches. So if I have 3 equal spaces, that means how big should each space be?
1 inch.
1 inch. Good man. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over to this side of my portfolio. So I am again bringing my ruler up to the top of the portfolio here. I'm actually gonna do this in Sharpie, guys, so you can see it. So I am going to come down 1 inch and make a mark. I'm gonna come down from that 7 inches, so to the 8-inch mark, and make a mark. Did that make sense? That I'm ready to mark at 8, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm gonna do the same thing over here. I'm going to come up 1 inch from the 8-inch mark. So now I've got my inch on the bottom, and then that last remaining space is another 8 inches. So I'm gonna come to my 8-inch mark, and I am gonna come up 7 inches from that. Now, do you wonder why I did it in that order? Anyone have a guess? Okay, so the reason that I measured from the top down and then the bottom down, or the bottom up, is because I know you guys are going to be using 12-inch rulers. So if you have a 12-inch ruler, it obviously only goes so far on here. And if there is any space on here that's going to be uneven, because unfortunately machined objects in the world aren't perfect. So this little gap here, for instance, is just under 1 inch. If I make sure that these 2 spaces are 1 inch and these 2 spaces are 7, and this one's a little shy of it, that's okay, because we're going to be using, like, if there's any wiggle room that you want that middle spot to be the wiggle room. Does that kind of make sense?
I'm a little confused.
Just promise me you'll measure down 1 inch, down to 8, and then not move your ruler, and measure up 1 inch to 7, and then up 1 inch, up 7 inches from there. Any spot that's going to be uneven, you want it to be in this middle section, just because you can't visually tell.
Holy fuck.
Miss Grau,
Yes.
is that, are we doing that so we can like put our logo thingy on it like multiple times?
Yes, you are. You are not doing it in Sharpie though. I am just doing this so you can see it.
And do we draw it every time, or is it going to be like a copied kind of thing so it's all the
You're
same?
it's going to be copied.
Okay.
Okay, so now we need the 5-inch dimension, but now since we have a 1 inch margin here, I want all my margins to be 1 inch. So that means I'm going to come over 1 inch to 5 inches. And from there, so I have my 6 mark here, I'm going to come over here to the 1. So that means that I now have a 5 mark and a mark with 1 inch border. And I'm going to do the same thing
Oh my God.
in the middle here. Measuring is an art, guys. I promise you. But once you're good at it, you never forget it. So I have some marks on here now. that are going to allow me. So see, I'm going to connect my two 5-inch marks over here. And I'm going to draw a straight line between those. So now that straight line is parallel to the edge here, and it's going to be able to act as my guide for making some other marks. So since I know my line here is straight, I'm going to use the top of the portfolio, measure down 1 inch and down 8 inches. And now I can go ahead and connect to the one on the edge, draw a straight line over. This will be in pencil when you guys do it, so you actually can erase this. I am doing this in Sharpie so you can see it. And then I can take these two other marks that I've already made and connect them. And I have a 5-inch by 7-inch box.
Ms. Grau,
Yes, dear.
what happens if your drawing's horizontal?
Well, you would just make your measurements horizontally. So I'll do these two, Dante, and then I'll do horizontal ones on the other side, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, what's up, Mossy?
What do you want to do? What do you do if you want to do it like in the middle? One of your things.
Want to do it in the middle? So I will do one in the middle. I'll actually do that with landscape. You take measurements from either edge,
Okay.
but I will do that next. So if I want these two repeating ones here, guys, it's the same thing. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say, okay, well, I now have a guide too. I know this line that I made here is straight, which is really nice. So I have another spot I can line up to, but I'm going to come down here to the bottom and put my ruler at 6, measure over at 5 and at 1, come up to my other mark here and do the same thing. And I'm going to connect my dots one more time. So you notice how my dots line up with my previous line? And do the same thing here. And of course, since I know that this line is straight, I can make my other markings on there. So I'm going to measure up from the 8 and up from there to 7. Guys, if any of you need specific instructions on how to do this for your specific portfolio, I'm happy to give them. I know that measuring can be terrifying and daunting. I promise you it is really pretty easy once you kind of get the logic behind doing it. So now I have two 5x7 boxes. So I have 2 places for my logo to go. But let's say I do want to do one in the middle and it's horizontal. So Mossy, this is yours. Mossy, yours is vertical, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so you're really just going to reverse the measurements on this. It's not a big deal. But if I want to put one in the middle here. So again, I said this was 22 inches wide. So what's half of 22?
11.
11. So one thing that we do know is if you put a line, and what's half of 17?
8.5.
8.5, all right. So using just your regular old 12-inch ruler, guys, you are going to be able to come down here, line your ruler up with the side corner, and come over 11 inches. Right? You still have room to do that with a 12-inch ruler. Don't flip your ruler around. Come up to the top of your portfolio. Put the edge of your ruler on there, and again, measure over 11 inches. So what happens when I connect those 2 lines? What line is that?
Directly down the middle.
Directly down the middle. So this is obviously something you will be doing in pencil, not in Sharpie, but there is a line directly down the middle. So you'll draw a line directly down the middle for that. Now, if we were measuring one, so it was 8.5 inches, right? For half of 17? Right?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
So 8.5 inches, I'm gonna line my ruler up one more time. And this is also when you're gonna see that my other measurements are good here. 8.5, and it is right between my other 2 marks that I made. Again, I am not going to flip my ruler around. I'm going to come to the other edge of the portfolio, line my ruler up and make a mark at 8.5 inches. I'm now going to connect those two marks and draw a straight line. So what's going to happen when I draw those two lines? Where is that intersection going to happen?
In the center.
Yep, in the exact middle of the portfolio. So if we have the exact middle of the portfolio, if it's easier for you guys to do that too, if that helps you to like align things to have smaller boxes, you can just draw your 4 lines. I've actually never thought of doing it that way, but that's a very good idea. So if you find your exact middle here. So if I wanted to put a 5x7 thing in here so that it's landscape in format, well, what is half of 7?
3.5.
All right, so I'm gonna put my ruler on this line that I know is straight, right? Because I drew it. I know this line is straight. So I am going to put my ruler at 3.5 right there, make a mark at 1 and a mark at 7. And so half of 5 is 2.5. So I'm gonna make a mark at 0 and 1 at 5. So again, I just lined the 2.5 up on there as well. So once your marks are here, this is gonna be, this isn't the easiest thing to do, but what I am gonna have you do is you do need some guidelines here. So again, we're gonna come to the top. Do not flip your ruler around. And I'm doing this on this edge because it is the shorter of the 2 edges in terms of which direction your ruler needs to go. So 3.5 inches, I'm gonna come over to 7 and come over to 1 here. So now I have something to line this up on, right? I can now say, okay, I can actually draw a line that goes there, but just for safety, I'm also going to make marks at the bottom edge of my portfolio. So 3.5, make a mark at 3.5 or at 1 and at 7. So now I have these 3 little hatch marks that run down my portfolio. So if I line up my ruler with all 3 of those and draw a line between them, clearly for you guys, this will be in pencil, I'm going to end up with a straight line where I need it. And the same thing will happen on this side. So I'm going to line up all 3 of my marks, hold my ruler. And in your guys' case, you can just measure down to your middle mark if you want, because you do have shorter rulers. But you guys can all see that this is centered, right? Yes. Okay. I know this is confusing. I promise it gets easier. So now, if I come over here, I know these 2 lines, I just made her straight. So I'm going to put a measurement at 2.5 on there, make a measure at the top, make a measure at 5, come over here, don't flip my ruler, do the same thing. And now if I connect all 3 of those guys, I am going to have a line right where I want it. And another one at the bottom of that square. So now I have a fully centered box for the middle. All of these other lines get erased in the end, so I do encourage that you press very lightly. But so 5x7 can fit there in the landscape format. A 5x7 can fit here. A 5x7 can fit here. And if you wanted to do a landscape format over on this side, again, it's going to be the same process, but you do have to figure out your margins again. I know this is a lot, guys. I'm going to be posting this video for you, so don't stress, okay? I know this is a lot, and I know it is not easy. So if we are coming over here and we want to put a landscape one over here. So I have, I have some marks on here, which is, that this has been centered here. So, but if I just wanted to measure from the edges for something that was landscape, so it is again 22 inches. So 22 inches divided by 22 inches with a 1/2 inch margin. I'm trying to think what your margins would be. Let's see.
Wait,
Someone's sibling. There we go. Okay. So I am going to say that I think an inch margin is probably smart regardless on this. Maybe not. Let's see. Okay, so if you intend to do a 7-inch, I'm just going to tell you this. If you tend to put landscape over on the edge, you are going to want a 1/2 inch margin. I can just tell you that by gauging. So if you are doing landscape, if you are doing portrait and you want the correct margins, portrait, so that's the vertical format. Portrait format from the edges is an inch margin. Landscape format from the edges is a 1/2 inch margin. They can go up or down that 1/2 inch margin, but just this edge over here is going to be a 1/2 inch. So if I wanted to, let's say, so I have one here in the center, and that one is, and you want their corners to match up, for instance, and this is how the measurements are going to work. You can actually start from this line right here and measure up the distance here. Does that make sense? That this does just become like kind of a grid? So if you want something to measure, so if you want a 5x7 inch box to be like match up the corners with this middle one, you basically are just going to measure in a 1/2 inch and then in a 1/2 inch down here, and you're going to end up with the same edge measurements, and you can just measure down from your previously created measurement. So if I was to do that where I wanted over here, this box, so I wanted one logo to sit like this, and then I wanted the next logo to just sit directly on its corner. And I already have this center line drawn. So I'm going to come up 2.5 inches from the center line because I know that's what this dimension was for me. And the beautiful part about that is I already have a straight line here. So I can just go ahead and measure from my already existing line. And I have another straight line for that. So I've done that. Now all I need to do to make sure I have a correct size spot for it is to measure up 5 inches and over 7 inches. And then from this edge over here, because I'm going to assume it's straight, measure up 5 inches and just connect my two lines. So now I'll have the correct size box. And then when I go to make this 7 mark, I'm just going to make my 7 mark over from this one and draw a line between them. No, don't go anywhere, portfolio. Measuring, I promise, and I know this isn't going to be easy for everybody. It never is. But I promise you will be good at it after this class. So now if you actually look at the back of this, I know it looks like a train wreck of lines, but here is one section where I'm going to be able to put a 5x7 logo, and it will go corner to corner with this one in the middle. If I wanted to do another one down here, I would do the exact same process. I would measure down from this little spot. I would measure down 5 inches. And from this middle line, I would measure down 2.5 inches, and I would connect those so that I had a straight line. Once this mark is down there, from this mark, I would measure down another 5 inches. I would connect them. And then in order to get the 7-inch one on there, once my 2 straight lines are in, you just measure over 7 inches on both of them and draw marks and do another one. So that would give you this pattern. It would give you 1, 2, 3. Now, if you wanted one that was centered in this direction, what do you think I'm going to change about my measurements? So when I made this, so this
opposite of the other one.
yes. So so hypothetically, if I were going to be reversing this from this middle mark, so actually, you know what, guys, I really recommend that you all find the center of the portfolio. It's going to make your lives a lot easier. So, but if that were the case, I would be putting the 3.5 marker at that, measure up to 7 from there and down from there, so that that would be my top to bottom dimension. And then my 2.5 would be here, and my side to side dimension would be here. Does that make sense? Is anyone just totally and unbelievably lost?
Yes, but I know there's the video.
Yes, and the video will be rewatchable. So the trick with measuring, and this is, you gotta just trust me on this one. The trick with measuring is making sure that you always keep your ruler the same direction. You're taking very exacting measurements and you're putting a decent amount of pressure on your ruler when you draw your line. Once you start thinking about 2 lines lining up on a page, so you're using the edges of the pages for things, your life gets a lot easier. You will always be able to draw a straight line. You'll always be able to draw a straight grid. You just got to take my word on that one. Anyways, unless anyone has any questions on that, that is it for me from today. Actually, you know, I'll show you what the next step is just so you're not all left in the dark, but I don't want you doing this without me approving your logo. So now you're at the stage that you're saying, well, how the hell do we get my logo into these boxes that we have now made? So you remember I told you that you had some computer paper? You're gonna take a sheet of your computer paper and your handy dandy graphite stick, and you're gonna coat a section of the back of the page. If it helps you to cut this down to size, you can. But what you do is you take your graphite paper and you put it graphite side down wherever you want it. So in this case, I'm actually just going to fold an edge so I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, I can see my edges well enough to be able to line something up. You can cut this if it makes it easier for you to cut a 5x7 box. I don't care, but I'm just going to do that so I can line it up. So if I were to line this up, you know what? I will grab a pair of scissors and I'll just go ahead and cut that edge. Okay, just gonna hack some of this off. So I measured it, so at least I know that edge is straight enough that I'll be able to line this paper up with it. Okay. So I'm gonna take this corner and line it up against my lines. And so so you guys have some Scotch tape in your kit. You want to very, very, very lightly tack it down with that. And I mean very lightly. I'm using artist tape because it's all I've got in my studio here, but only a couple pieces, don't use much tape. So you are going to just very lightly, almost no pressure, stick those down. So now I've got this graphite side down where I want my logo to go. So if I had my logo, which I don't have one that's totally finished, so I'm just going to pretend like this card is my logo for now. So if I have my logo, I'm going to line my logo up to that same corner, just like that. And I am going to go ahead and very lightly tack tape that on top again. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace over this logo by pressing really, really hard. So I can't do that through a card, so I'm just going to draw something down on it, but that is where you position your logo. So let's just say I'm just going to put hearts on it for funsies. Okay, so that's my logo. I peel this up, and I know it's very, very light, but you will see that all of my hearts have transferred into the exact spot. So you'll be able to transfer your logo into each space that way. Now, you can use the same piece of paper for this over and over again for transferring, but each time you transfer, you must recode it in graphite. It does come off. That's the trick, is that it actually does transfer it off. So does that kind of make sense on where you're going? And why we want to take so many measurements?
We have like a while to do this, right? Because this is
Oh, yeah, you guys are going to be able to work with me in the room all of next week and trial and error this until you get it.
okay.
I have a question.
What do you mean with you in the room?
Like the Zoom room.
Yeah, okay. That's what.
I would love to have an AP period, but this actually gives people more abilities to take my class. So, all right, I'm grabbing a portfolio, one sec. Okay, so today we are going to learn to measure the spaces on the back of your portfolio for your logo. So one thing I'm going to tell you is please don't do this until you're comfortable doing it. So if you're not comfortable doing it, don't do it unless we're in a working class period. And don't do this until I've approved your final logo. So most people are not going to start this today. I'm just going to do the demo today because I promise this is going to take you a little bit of time to get used to. All my AP people know what I'm about to do. So my AP guys, you can just work. Okay.
Is it okay if I just turn off my video?
Yeah, Elias. Can I see your face though? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
You're doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay, dear. Okay. So you have a portfolio. It looks like this. The back of it, so there are two sides. There's one side with a flap and one side without a flap. We're working on the no flappy side. So, sorry, I'm trying to move stuff over because I have a ton of stuff on my studio table right now. Okay. So, I'm going to be doing this, honestly, I kind of want to do it in Sharpie, but I need to be able to do this for the classes, and this is my only portfolio that I have. Okay, I'm going to show you how to measure the space on the back here. So you've probably been wondering why in the world I had you do them as 5x7s. And that's partially because it's the size that fits 3 times onto the back of one of these. So show of hands, how many of your logos are portrait format, meaning vertical? Okay, how many of them are landscape format? Okay, so I'm about evenly divided. All right, so you're gonna be able to do this with a 12-inch ruler. Obviously, like I said, I have a 24-inch ruler. If you have a larger ruler, it'll help you, but it's not gonna make or break it or anything. All right, so first things first, this portfolio is 17 inches in the short direction and 22 inches in the long direction. So, in terms of sizing, we want to remember some things about that. So, it is 17 inches by 22 inches. So this is going to require a little bit of math, and I'm sorry for that. But unfortunately, it is part of life. Obviously, the only place you're not going to be able to put anything is where this handle is. But if we were going to find the direct center of this, how would you go about doing that? So the first thing you'd do. Jack.
By 2.
Also
Divide by
say
2?
entire length.
Yep. So the first thing I'm going to do, and so I've said this multiple times at this point when we've been working in our sketchbooks, you're going to measure on both edges, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to measure to 11 inches on the top, not flip my ruler, come to the bottom and move over 11 inches. Now, on the 17, what's half of 17?
8.5.
Perfect, 8.5. So I'm gonna measure down from the corner, 8.5, and down from the corner on this side, 8.5. So what do you think I'm gonna do with those lines now that I have them drawn, or I have those marks made?
Connect them.
Yep. So we are gonna go ahead and do that on the big portfolio. So once we do that though, I'll do a little mini one on here. We're gonna connect the short one first. Now, why do you think I did that? Because you guys have short rulers, that's why. So now on this line, just to double check, I'm gonna measure down another 8.5 so that then you can just measure across and across, and you'll have the actual middle of your portfolio. So in order to do that on this, so yes, I know I'm using a larger ruler, but I'm gonna use it like it's 12-inch ruler. Oops, this side, don't drop it. Okay. So I'm going to take my ruler and measure over 12 inches. And I'm gonna not flip it over, move it to the bottom edge, and measure over, I'm sorry, 11 inches. I made a mistake. It's early, forgive myself. So 11 inches. So 11 and 11. So I am now going to connect those two things. So your ruler is gonna be a little bit short for this. That's okay, line it up as best you can and draw the top part of your line. And then move your ruler down, connect it to your other mark and make sure you're connecting that line. And draw the mark the rest of the way. I know this is gonna be a little bit hard to see, guys, but so now there's a line directly down the middle of my portfolio. So now I need the 8.5 ones. So I'm gonna flip my portfolio around and I'm gonna measure down from the corner, 8.5 inches. And then I'm gonna come to this middle line and I'm gonna line my ruler up at the top, 8.5 inches. And then come to the back edge of the portfolio here, 8.5 inches. So now, all I need to do is actually connect these two here, which is less than a 12-inch ruler. So I'm gonna line my lines up, connect to the middle there, and come over here, line my mark up here, connect to my other mark, and draw my line. And now I have 4 quadrants that are centered around the middle of the portfolio. So if we use this to make our, to put our 5x7 boxes anywhere, we now have some lines that we can know are straight. So you can put your 5x7 logo anywhere on here, but you need to draw a box ahead of time. So show of hands, does anyone want theirs directly in the center? At least one couple of people. Okay. So if we are looking at this portfolio now, so since this is directly in the center, we can measure around this a little bit and it'll get a little easier. So we are going to draw 5x7 boxes, but make sure that the one thing I'm going to tell you is that they all, if they're near the edge, you want to have them the same distance from the edge. So I can just tell you from practice that if you have a portrait format one, your borders are going to be 1 inch. And if you have a landscape format one, your borders are going to be 1/2 inch. And I'm just telling you that because I know how they fit on the portfolio. But let's worry about putting one in the middle here. because you're going to be able to do some interesting things because of this. So I'm going to go back to Sharpie on paper because it's easier for you guys to see. All right, so what would the first step be if I were going to be putting something in the middle here? What would you do?
Draw a box of whatever you're putting in the middle.
Sort of, but how do we center it?
Measure out, isn't it 5 by 7?
Yes.
Measure out 2.5 inches going vertical, and then what, 3.5 inches going horizontal.
Perfect, Jack. Perfect. I'm so proud of you. You obviously know how to use a ruler. So Jack is exactly right. We're going to use this grid that we now have here, and we're going to measure out from this middle line. So we're going to measure, I can't write upside down all the time. We're going to measure 3.5 inches on one side and 3.5 inches on the other side. Then we're going to measure up from that 2.5 inches and 2.5 inches. And so when we do that, we're going to end up with 4 little marks around the edge. And I know that you're looking at this like, well, how the hell do I know that those are straight? They're just marks, right? Well, luckily, up at the top here, that mark crosses another line that we know is straight. So right here, I'm going to measure out 3.5 and out 3.5 and make marks. I'm going to do the same thing from the center line down here. And so now I have marks that tell me whether or not my lines are straight. So I can go ahead and line up a ruler with those and know that this whole middle section will be a straight mark. So we're going to go ahead and put just the 3.5 section in. Now, obviously, if your logo is the other format, so right, this is for a landscape format one. If your logo, we're going to reverse it. So if you have your centered spot on here and you have one, so this is going to be a box that looks like this. It's going to go right in the center. What if you have a portrait format one? That means that when you measure this, you're only going to measure 2.5 inches on either side, and you're going to measure your 3.5 inches on the other two. So then when you measure out from this middle line up here, you're going to do 2.5 inches on either side here, and that'll end up in a portrait format box in the middle. Guys, I know this is a lot, and I will be posting this video, so you will get to see this and watch it again if you need help. I will also, if you want to not start measuring until we actually have class time to measure, that's totally fine. I understand that this is a little intimidating. I was terrible at this in high school, by the way. Okay, so so Jack, you have a landscape format one, right?
Oh, I have a portrait.
You have portrait? Okay, well, since you're the one who guessed how I'm going to do these measurements, I'm going to do the portrait format on the big one. So, okay. So if we take our ruler, and I'm going to use this middle line here, which I know is hard to see for you guys, but it's on here. And I'm going to line up at the 2.5 inches. So I have 2.5 inches on this side of my middle mark. I'm going to make a mark at 0. And then I'm going to make another mark at 5. So yes, now I have these 2 adorable marks. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to put my ruler at 2.5. So right now I have it on the line that I know is straight, that I have drawn, and I'm using the fact that I know this edge is straight. So I'm going to make a mark at 0 and a mark at 5. So the little handles will be annoying here, and I'm sorry about that. You can kind of move them out of the way to hold a ruler over them. Okay, that's nice and lined up. So I'm only going to draw up to the little nubbin there because I know that it's not going to go past the nubbin. All right. Oh, that was not straight. There we go. Okay. So I just drew in 2 lines that go up to this because I obviously can't go past this. I promise the middle one is the hardest. It's obviously because we have the most real estate around it. So same deal. Not gonna flip my ruler over like I almost did. And I'm gonna come down here and put my ruler on the 2.5, make a mark at 0, make a mark at 5. And again, draw lines between those marks. So my ruler's lined up. Okay, so now I have this centered, long, skinny box. Can you guys kind of see that? Okay, I'm gonna show you the one I did for class yesterday, so you've got to get an idea what I'm doing. So this centered, long, skinny box. This one's a different format, but the centered, long, skinny bar in here. So this one just is a little narrower, but same thing. There's the middle line. So I have this centered, long, skinny box now. And I need to make that the correct dimension. So now I'm going to take my ruler and at 3.5, make a measure up here at 7 and 1 at 0. And I know all my lines are straight now because I have done a great job measuring. So 1 at 7, 1 at 0. And now all I have to do is line up between these new marks that I made. Ooh, there we go. All right, now I have a centered landscape format mark in the middle of it. Do you guys kind of see that? You will be doing this in pencil. And you do want to press lightly because some of this stuff needs to get erased. So once we have our centered metal format box, now you can choose any option. I mean, actually, you're not even constrained to the center. You can choose any place on this portfolio that you want them to go as long as they're straight. So if you want them to butt all the way up to the edges, you can. I think they look a whole lot better with a border around them. If you wanted to say, take 3 and tile them equally across this, well, how would we do that? So I have one box here that I know is the right size. So I'm going to take a little bit of measurement here. All right, up to that edge, I have 8.5 inches. So 8.5 inches from that edge. So if I wanted to center something else over here, it's going to be a similar process, but what is half of 8.5? 4.25?
Yeah.
So 4.25, the problem with that is that we're not going to have any space on the edge for one of these logos. Or actually, yes, we will. I'm lying. So 4.25 will center it in the spaces over here. So if I wanted to tile this, so that I had 3 that were equally spaced across this, we would go ahead and make that the center of this other one. So 4.25, and so I'm going to just make a mark up here at 4.25, just so I can draw a line. And I'm gonna make one at the bottom too. And remember, no flipping your rulers. I'm just gonna connect all 3 of these really quickly and get a middle line down. Obviously you have to do this in 2 parts because you guys don't have 24-inch rulers, but. So now I have another center line that I can measure off of, and I'll use the exact same process that I used here. I'll measure out 2.5, out 2.5, out 2.5, out 2.5, and connect all my lines. And now the lovely thing, so I'm actually going to do this one because once you have one down, your life gets a lot easier because we can say that a lot of these things, oh, I know these are straight. So I'm going to measure out 2.5 inches from each of these here and just center one more box. So 2.5, 5. All right, I'm going to do the same thing up top. Okay, and I'm gonna do the same thing at the bottom here. 2.5. Okay, now I am going to go ahead and draw these in. But one of the loveliest parts about this is that since we've already made our 7-inch mark here, I already know where the tops of these logos are going to be because I want it to match the other two, or the other one that's on here, and eventually the third one that would go in. So I have my two sidelines in, but now I have these great marks here and here that tell me exactly what height I want it. So all I need to do is come over to this one straight line I have on the far edge and make a mark at 0 and a mark at 7. And then I can just connect my other lines that I already have on the portfolio and just draw the bottom of the box. And the top of the box. And now I have 2 that are on here that'll be, so once I complete the third one, they would be centered across the entirety of the portfolio, evenly tiled across it. If for some reason you're looking at this and you're like, well, that's really close to the handle, I don't know if I like what that looks like aesthetically, you could arguably move them down a little bit. It just means that you would take a different measurement on the top. So it just means more math for you. If you intend on doing something like that and messing with the measurements, you need to give me your measurements ahead of time so that I can check that it will work. And like I said, do not do this until you have a logo that I have commented on Canvas and said, this is approved. Okay? Because I don't want you transferring it and just, because once something goes onto this, there's no going back. Is anyone horribly, horribly lost, or is everyone okay?
I'm kind of lost a little, but I think I understand the gist of it.
Josh, what are you having problems with?
Okay, because I think it's mainly because like you were doing, it was as you weren't doing the landscape, so I was getting a little confused.
Do you want me to, I mean, I can do a little one. Do you want to see it with the other format?
Well, I was just wondering if I could do like one to the top left, and then one in the middle, and then one in the bottom right.
Absolutely. Or do you have a horizontal format one, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's actually quite a bit easier for you to do that too.
Okay.
Just in terms of the shape of your, I would tell you it's much harder to do that adjustment with the portrait format boxes because they're offset from each other in order to fit. Yours are going to fit almost perfectly. So actually, Josh, I started doing that on this one. So if you notice the middle box here is landscape format. Yeah. So that's the format yours is going to be. This box up here, so all you have to do is it connects at the corner. So basically you just take the top line, make a measurement on this side. Actually, I'll do this in little, but I think it's quite a bit easier. So if we have okay. So there's the outside of my portfolio. I'm gonna say the handle is right there. Actually comes down a little lower. There's the handle. So there's my portfolio. So I have come over and made a mark at 11 and a mark at 11. And I have drawn a line between those. Obviously, I'm just doing this freehand so I can do it quickly and show you guys. I've made a mark at 8.5 and 8.5, one in the middle at 8.5, drawn a line and drawn a line. So now I have the center of my portfolio. So now you want it centered and then you want them to go corner to corner, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if you want them to go corner to corner, so you're going to measure out 3.5 inches and out 3.5 inches. Make 3.5 inch marks top and bottom. So now we're using this middle line as a reference. You're going to connect all 3 of those and all 3 of those. So now we have our 7-inch box. And then you're going to measure down 2.5 off the middle one and off these 2 side ones because we know that they're straight. So now we have our 2.5. So there's our middle box. Now, if I want to put a logo down here, the easiest way to do that is that I am going to go ahead and measure down from this middle line 2.5 inches and I'm going to connect this line here. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing up here. I'm going to measure up from this line, 2.5 inches, and connect this line here. So now I know exactly what area my box is going to go in. So from here, it gets really simple. From this little spot where they intersect right here, I'm going to measure down 5 inches, come over to this line and measure down 5 inches and draw a line across. And then from this line, so same intersection spot, I'm going to measure over 7 and come onto this bottom one and measure over 7 and draw a line. Do the same thing up top. I'm going to measure up 5, come over from this line, up 5, draw a line, come from the same intersection, measure over 7, come to this top line, over 7, and there we go. We've got 1, 2, and 3 centered and tiled. That makes sense?
Yeah, yes, it does.
Okay. So guys, I know this can look terrifying. Don't be afraid of it. I'm just going to say that. Don't be afraid of it. All right. So now this is going to take us a few classes. I promise this is something I'm a stickler about, but also it is one of those things like you want to get it right because this is the thing that you keep around for the whole year. But I'm sure you're wondering how in God's name we're getting your logo onto here 3 times. So what we're going to do is you're going to take a piece of that plain computer paper. So remember I showed you how to make graphite paper? We're going to take, I really want something to like draw on that isn't this portfolio. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to take my computer paper and my graphite stick, and I'm going to use this corner side of the page. And I'm going to just coat that sucker in graphite. It doesn't need to be much bigger than a 5x7 to do that. So, but I've got something that I now know has a straight edge, right? I've got this upper corner of the page that I know has a straight corner on it. So if I am transferring into this middle box here, as a for instance, I'm going to first take my page with the graphite, so graphite side down, and line it up into that box. And I want to line it up on an edge where I can see that I am lining it up on, like onto 2 straight lines. You want to make sure it's filled. So I'm going to go ahead and line that up. Perfect. And so you guys have Scotch tape. You're going to take a tiny little piece of Scotch tape and very lightly tack tape these down. I'm not putting any pressure on them. It's just enough that it won't move. But I don't want you ripping the portfolio when you pull the tape up. So now I have my graphite paper down. So I don't have a logo at the moment, so I'm just going to use I'll use a hypothetical box out of one of these. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and use this color test that I have. So I ripped this out of my sketchbook. I'm going to take the little perforated edge off. And that gives me a nice edge to know where my straight line is, but I have a feeling that's not going to line up correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my 5x7 box out. All right, so there's my 5x7 box. And now I'm going to line this up into that same corner. So I'm going to use the lines that I know are straight to be able to align my logo onto this. So again, I'm going to take 2 very small pieces of tape. I'm going to line it up really well, and I'm going to lightly tack tape this down as well. So I'm now ready to transfer. So when you transfer something, you really want to press hard. And you want to be nice and careful doing it.
Dom got kicked out of the Zoom meeting. He's rejoining.
Thank you, dear. So I am pressing really hard. If you make a mistake while you're transferring, it's not a big deal because it's going to transfer really lightly, but you do want to make a mental note that you made a mistake and erase it once you flip it over. Okay. So I have transferred my circle on there. So now I'm going to peel both of these up and I have a circle. Yay! There's a circle in the hole. So basically we're just carbon transferring them into that. So it allows you to basically transfer your logo identically every single time. Now, I know, so I will tell you, you can reuse this piece of graphite paper over and over again, but every time you go to transfer with it, you need to recoat it in graphite. Because if we were in the classroom, I'd actually show you this up close, but there is a spot where that circle has taken the graphite off of the back of this. So you have to recoat it in graphite each time. We will re-go over this when you guys are actually ready to transfer, but I did want you to know that's how we're getting them into the boxes. Poor Dom, he keeps getting kicked out. But just to show you guys, it's very, very easy to erase once it's on here because it doesn't have any of the pressure of the graphite that you would have put on it. So for instance, if you made a mistake and you transferred it wrong, comes up super, super simply. And you're free to start over again. So it's really easy. Did I lose anybody? Everyone okay? All right. So we are not going to start doing this until next class, but I had to do the full demo for you. I will be checking off your logos and telling you yay or nay, or hey, this needs working on in the next day. So I'll be giving you little comments. If you need to change something, please check your Canvas comments. But unless you guys have any questions, that's it for me for the day. Oh, Gio, that looks freaking gorgeous, dude.
Am I done now?
Yes, you're done.
Good.
Beautiful. Beautiful work.
So just take a picture of it and then
Yeah,
send it to you just to verify.
Yeah. But I also, I mean, you need a good photo of it for documentary purposes anyways.
Yeah. I've just been going on to portrait mode and then taking a picture.
Beautiful job. It looks amazing. Great work, dude. Way to bring that back around. It looks amazing. All right, guys, but that is it for me unless you have any questions. I will see you all soon. Have an absolutely wonderful day. And I think I see you guys Friday.
See you tomorrow.
Oh, I see you tomorrow?
Yeah.
I hate this schedule.
Thank you.
Thank
Guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Have an absolute lovely day, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Miss Farrell.
Thank you, guys.
Miss Grau, sorry about the Zoom problems.
Oh, it's okay, Dom. Dom, if you need any piece of that, I'm posting the video for you guys so you'll be able to see it, okay?
All right. I think I got it because I could still hear most of it. It's just I couldn't see anything, so then I had to leave and then rejoin.
Okay. The only thing would be you missed the graphite transfer part of it, I think, but that's no big deal because I'm going to re-go over that before you transfer anyways.
All right. And then I had a question. So let's just say hypothetically, if I measured my thing out 6 by 7 instead of 5 by 7, would I have to cut out an inch?
Well, so the short answer is maybe. So if you wanted to construct a whole set of measurements for the back of this portfolio that involved a 6 by 7 logo, I would let you do all the legwork and figure that out and let you do a 6 by 7 logo. However, if you don't want to do all that, you need to cut an inch out. I think it would be pretty simple, quite honestly, especially if you go off if you go from the middle out. It just means that the direction that you measure your 2.5 inch is going to be a 3 inch measurement.
Yeah.
So it would be easy enough to design. So, I mean, the answer is no but.
All right. Okay, thank you.
The dimensions are 17 by 22. It's easy enough to fudge.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Have a good day, honey. Stuff like that. All right, guys. So your logo is going to get transferred onto your portfolio 3 times. But there are some constraints onto where it's going to go on your portfolio. So first of all, portfolio. There is a flappy side and a non-flappy side. We're using the non-flappy side. So can I have you all turn on your cameras just for a sec, because I need to show a hands on some stuff on here. Everybody, please. Okay, how many people have portrait format logos? Just raise your hand.
Oh, I think I do.
Like top to bottom, this direction. How many people have portrait format logos?
Me.
This class is going to be, wow, this class is going to be way under the other one. Josh probably doesn't have an important question, James, since you throw him under the bus every class by saying he has an important chess question and putting him on the spot and making him have to say, I don't have a very important question.
He definitely does.
Okay, Josh, what's your important question?
James can just stop, talking. That's my question. No, thank you.
Yeah, James, I was right. So anyways, so we have the two formats. So there's portrait and there is landscape, which goes this way. How many people here have landscape format?
Yes.
Okay. Most of this class looks like they're landscape format. Okay. All right. I doubt that James is a peanut, but he kind of deserved that. Just saying. I'm sorry, whenever I hear that, all I ever think of is the bad lip reading video of, God, what's his name? It's a football.
Adrian Peterson.
Yes, of Adrian Peterson saying
Yeah,
like,
the peanuts. I like peanuts. Yeah.
I like peanuts. I don't know why. It's all I ever think of when I hear the word peanut. It just cracks me up. Okay, so the thing about getting your logo on here is we have to make sure that that 5x7 box that you're going to put on here is straight. So how are we going to do that? And there are a million steps to this. So I apologize in advance. I'm going to be kind of an asshole about this. I'm sorry. Like this happens to be something that I'm a stickler for, which is good measurement, which means we're going to do some measuring demos here today. I'm going to do my best with this on Zoom. I am going to say, do not start this part of the process until after I have approved your logo. If I have physically written on your Canvas turn-in, approved, then you're okay to start this part. So you need my approval. If for some reason you question what I'm doing on here and you're like, I have no idea what's going on, I don't know how to start this, wait until next hour when you actually will have working time to do this and you can ask me questions as you go, okay? So don't attempt this. If for some reason you don't get this, don't attempt it unless I'm actually we're in class, okay? So your portfolio is 17 inches by 22 inches. And so the way I've designed this level of measurement is that you are going to be able to use a 12-inch ruler to do this. So 17 inches by 22 inches. The handle is right here. Okay, so if I were to ask you to find the center of this portfolio, how would you go about doing that? Anybody at all? Ben?
You can find half of each side and then like draw lines to the middle, and then that's the center.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so that means that my first mark, I'm going to make a mark at 11 inches on the top because that's half of 22 and 11 inches on the bottom. Now, I know that this 17 inches is longer than your ruler. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to do your best when you connect this first line, because this first line is going to be the iffiest of them. So you can measure from the middle if you want to have a marker in there, just to kind of give yourself an idea. That's not going to guarantee it's straight, but you can do pretty well with that. So we're going to draw a line with pencil. I'm doing this in Sharpie so you can see it. Draw a line down the middle of your portfolio at 11 inches. Then you're gonna come to the 17-inch side. What's half of 17, guys?
8.5. 8.5.
36.
8.5. So I'm gonna measure down 8.5. I'm gonna come down this middle line that I now know is straight, measure it, put a mark at 8.5, and do the same thing on this edge of the portfolio. Now I can go ahead and connect my ruler from here to here, and then here to here, and I will have the middle of the portfolio. So once I have my middle of my portfolio, if you have a landscape format, you have some different options than if you have portrait format. So how many people here, just show of hands, how many people here want to center one of their logos?
Ooh.
Okay, quite a few of you. All right, so you don't have to center it. I will give you, you are able to put 3 of these anywhere on this portfolio. If you need help coming up with measurements for that, I'm fine helping you do that. But I am going to tell you that starting at the center is probably, I mean, in terms of a graphical decision, a good decision, but it's also very easy because we have a geographic landscape here set up that tells us where the center of the portfolio is. So if we were going to put a landscape format box and we wanted to center it on this, what do you think my first step would be?
To measure your portfolio.
After that, we've already measured the portfolio. How am I going to get 5 by 7 to be centered in the middle there?
Do the same thing with the lines on the 5 by 7.
There you go.
And line up the centers.
Okay, so that means from this middle line, I'm going to measure out 3.5 inches and make a mark. So this is for a landscape format because I have mostly landscape format in this class. And then I'm going to measure out, oops, shit, sorry, I didn't move. There we go. I'm going to measure out 3.5 inches from the other side. So, but I know that you're looking at this and you're like, well, how the hell do I draw a straight line from just making 2 marks?
Ruler.
So, what would you guess I would do?
Ruler.
Sort of. It's going to involve a ruler. So we've drawn this line down the entirety of the middle. So I know that that line at the top is the same as that line in the middle. So I'm going to make a mark out at 3.5 inches from the line here and 3.5 inches out from the line here and do the same thing on the bottom. So now I can take a ruler and connect all my lines so that I have a straight middle section that is 7 inches wide. So this is 7 inches now. So once that's 7 inches, now I have a bunch of lines that I know are straight. So I can say, all right, well, I need this to be 5 inches and I want it centered. So I'm going to measure down 2.5 inches on this middle one and up 2.5 inches. And I'm going to do the same thing from these 2 intersections here. We connect our lines and you have a 5 by 7 box that will get filled in with your logo. So now, who would say that they would be interested in taking that same landscape format box and tiling it so that you had one here and one here? No? Do you want them to go straight across? So Gio, you're shaking your head. Where do you want your other ones to go?
Oh, we have to put 3. Oh, I mean, then I don't know. Yeah,
So
probably.
Where would you want them?
Probably right next to each other. So like 1, 2, 3.
Across the middle?
Yeah.
Okay, would you want there to be space between them or do you want them all sandwiched together?
Oh, definitely a space between them.
Okay, so if you want to do space between them, so now we have this 7-inch gap here. That means that we have 8.5 inches on either side here. I just know that from doing a million of these. But so if we have this space on either side, we now need to center in either side there. So this is 7 inches. So 22 minus 7 is, what's 22 minus 7? I'm terrible at math on the spot.
15.
15. All right. So I am right. No, it's 7.5 inches. So that means that you will measure this area here. And then so that means one edge of your logo is going to line up against here, and you're going to leave a 1/2 inch gap in between them. If you want them to line up with each other, the ½ inch would be on this edge of the thing. But you have, if you do decide to tile them all across the middle, you have a very easy job, right? You know that this edge of the portfolio is straight. You have a middle line that has been drawn. So if you do want to center it, so hypothetically, so this is 7.5 inches, you're going to measure over a ½ inch and over a ½ inch here, but over a ½ inch and make a mark. You're then going to come over to this edge of the portfolio and measure down from this line 2.5 inches and measure up from this line 2.5 inches. So now all you have to do is take a ruler and connect your already existing box to that, and then just measure over from the edge of the portfolio 7 inches and make a line. So now we have our other box. So if you don't want that space in between, your job gets even easier, which is that you're going to come over to this edge here. So I'm going to do, this is hypothetically if you wanted this gap in between your design. If you don't want a gap in your design, you're going to measure down 2.5 inches and up 2.5 inches, and then just draw a line across. Now, all you have to do is measure from this actual line where the edge of your design is over 7, make your marks and draw a straight line between them. And that'll give you a gap around the edge of the portfolio. Is everyone with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we were doing this in landscape or in portrait format, it changes a little bit because if you want to center things if you want to center things vertically, there are a few more measurements you have to take. So any of my portrait format people, are you interested in having one in the center and having all 3 across? Or do you want to tile them like corner to corner?
Tile.
Tile it.
Tile it? Great. Okay, so if you want to tile it corner to corner, so same deal, measurements at 11. Draw your line in between. Measurements at 8.5. Draw your line in between. So we have our center. If we are making one of these that is, so now it's 7 inches in this direction, measure down from your center 3.5 inches and up from your center 3.5 inches. Come to this edge of the portfolio, measure up 3.5 and down 3.5. Same on this. Now you can go ahead and draw your line across that. So we have a 7-inch band. So this gives you a lot of, so for doing this particularly, you have a lot of room now. So if you wanted to go ahead and center your first one, we're going to measure over 2.5 on all 3 of those and go ahead and connect our lines. So once that one's down, you can decide where else you want things to go. So for instance, if you wanted to have these go straight across the portfolio, what you would now do is you would want it centered in this gap here. So if this is 11 minus 2.5, so that's 8. 11 minus 2.5 is 8, right? Actually, I have one of these done, so.
11 minus 2.5, I'm pretty sure that's just 8.5.
Oh, it is. I'm just an idiot. It's fine. I'm very bad at math on the spot. Always have been. Okay. So it is 8.5 inches from here to the edge of the portfolio. If you wanted to go ahead and center something on that, you would take half of 8.5 as your middle portion, so 4.25, and make a mark at 4.25 and then use that as the center of a box, just like you would here. So if you did want to center something over here, you would take measurements at 4.25 on those lines that already exist and draw a line between them, and then use that as the center of your box, making things top and bottom. So you could actually center them on either side. Now, if you wanted to tile them, the thing that's going to end up a little odd about tiling the vertical format is that once we have all of these things in, and we have our centered middle box, right? So once we have all of these things in, this distance from the middle line down is only 8.5 inches. So you have to figure out what edge amount you want around your design. So I know that if you center something on this, it's going to be, the middle of it's going to be 4.25 inches over. but it's also going to leave a 1 3/4 inch gap between the design. And I'm just telling you that for reference. It's this big. There's a 1 3/4 inch gap. I would say that's probably a good call, but now you have to figure out where on height they're going to be here, because there is going to be some overlap. So I like my borders to be even personally. So I'm actually not going to center them, I don't think. No, it looks nice. Let's see what my border edge is. Yeah, it's 1 3/4 does look nice. Okay, I'm gonna do 1 3/4. I'm choosing a difficult measurement here, but whatevs. So in order to put that on here, I am gonna go ahead and make my mark over here at 4 1/4 inches in. And I'm gonna do the same thing from the bottom corner here. And I'm gonna go ahead and connect those. So now I have a middle line. So I'm now gonna measure out from both of these lines 2 1/2 inches. So there we go. There are my other edges, and there are my other edges. And I'm just going to fill this whole space with, so this is far too tall as it stands right now, but I want to be able to use my easiest measurement here, which is to come up 1 inch and 3/4. So now I'm going to come up 1 3/4 inches here. And so 1 3/4 inches, and I'm just going to draw that across all three. So looking at, I want to look at that on here. So my overlap is going to be slightly over this middle line. So you're actually then going to have to measure to make sure that your 7-inch dimension is correct. So in this case, this is going to be under 7 inches at this point. So you can actually just line your ruler up against that. You know it's a straight line. And from this corner up, draw this up to be a 7-inch line. And then just connect your 2 points. So we would go ahead and do that exact same thing over here. So basically, when you tile these guys, they're going to end up kind of overlapping in that middle. So they're going to cross the middle line a little bit. So it's a little more difficult of a measurement because you have to make some decisions on what kind of borders you want. I would also give you the option if you wanted to center one and then have 2 that actually sit directly in the corners. That would be fine. It does require, it's a much easier measurement. I think this would look better, but I will leave that up to you. It is your portfolio after all. So in terms of actually doing this, it feels like it should be really easy, but I am going to remind you of some stuff. Always make sure you're not flipping your ruler around. So I actually have one here that I have some measurements on, and I'm just going to go over what I did to get this. I know the markings are not the easiest thing to see. So first things first, I did my measurement and I measured over 11 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and just double check myself there. Okay. So I'm going to make a mark at 11 inches. Then I'm going to come again. Notice I did not flip my ruler. Come over here and make a mark at 11 inches. I'm going to do the same thing towards the middle just to give myself, like, I'm just using the edge of the ruler and assuming I'm going to be pretty much right on where that goes. But now I'm going to go ahead and connect my 2 11-inch marks. So I'm pretending like I have a 12-inch ruler right now. I'm going to go ahead and connect my 2 marks, and then I'm going to come down here and connect these 2 marks. That'll give me my center line. So then over here, I'm going to go ahead and use my ruler and measure down 8.5 inches and make a mark. I'm going to do the same thing against my straight line in the center. And I'm going to do my same thing over here on the edge of the portfolio. So again, I'm never flipping the ruler around. You notice I just take the ruler and scoot it over. So now I'm going to go ahead and draw my middle line. So I'm going to go over to my mark over here on the edge. Fill that in. I'm going to do the same thing over here. So at that point, you will have this X in the middle of your portfolio. So you will have a crossed middle area. So if I were to put something on here, so again, same deal. Right now there is a 7-inch box on here. So in order to do that, I placed my ruler at 3.5 inches. So at that middle spot, I measured down and up from there against my middle line. And I did the same thing on the sides of the portfolio over here. So I used that same middle line that goes across the entirety of my portfolio and made a mark at 0 and at 7. So that at least gives me enough to be able to make straight lines. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the 2.5s. So I make a mark at 2.5, a mark at 2.5, come down to the bottom of the portfolio, 0 and 5, and then do the same thing at the top of the portfolio. 0 and 5. All right. So now in order to draw this middle bar, I'm just going to go ahead and connect those marks that I already have. So I have to do this in 2 halves because I know you guys don't have the longer ruler. So I'm just going to go ahead and connect my marks. I know it's a little weird with the handle on here. I'm going to connect my marks. And I'm just going to draw up to the handle because I know it's not going to go past that. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And I'm going to do the same thing connecting my bottom mark up to my middle mark. And the same thing over here. So now I have this middle bar that is 5 inches wide. And now I need to make my top and bottom marks to make it 7. So I know at any given moment, like once I'm done making a line like that, I know that the line I've made is straight. So I'm going to go ahead and I've made my 3.5 inch marks here, but I'm just going to double check myself on them. But since I now have 2 marks that are straight, I just know where they are, right? I know the lines themselves are straight, so I'm going to go ahead and use those as my guideline, and then just go ahead and connect those 2, and I will end up with a centered middle box. So now we've got a centered graphite box in there, and you will be doing this in graphite. I'm going to show you one of these I did in pen, just so you can see what kind of marks I make to do this. So you can see my top, middle, bottom marks on all of these. This is obviously a landscape format one, so it goes 3.5 inches in either direction and 2.5 inches up and down. I also have two centered vertical ones over here, and then one that is tiled to the corner of this one. If you wish to tile something, you're basically just going to use that corner to start your measurement. It's actually pretty easy to do. So you have lots of options on where these things go. And actually, if you wanted to invent something like, let's say you wanted vertical format, but you wanted all 3 really close to the middle with only 1/2 inch spacing, all you have to do is tell me what measurements you're doing, draw a little diagram so I know you know how to do it, and then I will usually approve it as long as it's going to look good. If it's not going to look good, I'm not going to let you do it. So that is where we're going. But now you're wondering, why the hell am I drawing all these stupid boxes, and how am I going to get my image onto my portfolio? So I already showed you how to make graphite paper, but I'm going to go over it one more time. So you are going to take a piece of your computer paper, and using one edge of the page, so you see how I've used a corner here? You're going to take your graphite stick, and you're just going to coat this whole section in graphite. So you notice I'm using the corner of one of the pages, and there's a reason for that. There's a method to my madness here. So once it's coated in graphite, let's say I want to line that up into this middle section right here. Obviously yours will not be in Sharpie, so you don't need to worry about that. I'm just doing that for demo purposes. So you have some Scotch tape in your kit. I want you to use this very, very lightly and very sparingly, because I don't want you to rip the cover of your portfolio. So you're going to line up your graphite. So you notice I have the graphite corner lined up into one edge of the box here. So I can see all the lines that I've made. So I know that it is straight because I am lining it up into straight lines that I have made. And I'm going to go ahead and very lightly tack tape that down so it won't move. And then I am going to take one of my logos. So in this case, I'm just using one that I had in my sketchbook. So I ripped out the page and I took off the little fluffy edge I just folded it, and then I cut the rest of my 5x7 box out. So I cut along the lines that I'd made, so now I have a perfectly 5x7 piece of paper. And I am going to put my logo on top of that. And again, take a very small amount of your Scotch tape, line it up in the box lines. So you want to make sure that your edges touch, and then very lightly tack tape that to the portfolio so it will not move. So once this is on here, so obviously this isn't a finished logo, but yours will be your finished logo. It doesn't need to be colored either. This is the one I had. So now what you're going to do is you are going to go over your existing logo. Ooh, shit, pressing really hard, like hard enough that I just broke a pencil. You can actually use almost anything for this. You can use pen as well. It just, you have to be able to put a decent amount of pressure on it. Pen can be easy too, because you can see it if you haven't gone over it. But I mean, I am really pushing. Like, I'm putting a lot of force on this, especially because our sketchbook paper is relatively thick. So you really want to make sure you're putting a decent amount of weight on it. Okay, so I would finish going over my logo, and then I would peel all of this up, and ta-da! I have an exact copy of the thing that I am trying to transfer down. Now, if you make a mistake at this stage, I am going to tell you it's really not a big deal when you're using the graphite to transfer. Because we're transferring off of another page, it's really easy to erase. So it's basically just graphite powder at this stage. So it's really pretty simple to get off of a surface. Once you start adding Prismacolor, that's when we start running into erasing issues, because that stuff is not erasable. So you can continue to use the same graphite paper over and over and over again, but each time you transfer, you need to recoat this part in graphite. And that's because you will start to notice that there will be a spot, and you'll actually be able to see the line on where it's pulled the graphite off the page when you've done that transfer, because you are actually transferring the graphite from one page to the other. All right. Any questions for me?
This row.
So the
for the basics, like if like for more complicated stuff, like you only had a circle, would we also have to trace like everything in it too?
Okay, you trace every little bit.
Okay.
But it does prevent you from having to need to redraw it. You're tracing it, and tracing is much faster than drawing, right?
Yeah.
So and actually, I mean, if any of you take painting with me next year, we use transferring constantly. It is something that is actually like very, very much used. We don't make our own transfer paper for that. We use a pre-made one, but transferring is something that you do quite a bit, especially like if you need a clean version of a drawing. I've transferred more of my drawings than I can count. Just if like, you just need to.
So then in your actual class, you know how like you had those like the photos where it was like the white and then the black and then the inverted where it was all black and then the white, are those transferred or are those like hand drawn?
One half of that is transferred, the other half is hand drawn.
Oh yeah, that I know. I was like the all black one is transferred, right?
Yeah, so that project, if we are back on campus, we will be doing that project as it stands. If we're not back on campus, that project has a terrifying number of steps, and I'm going to have to rethink how that's done.
Okay.
Because there's a whole section where you trace it onto another page and you use a photocopier, and like it's an all over the place sort of. So it's a super fun project, but yes, the last stage on that is transferred with graphite paper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you remember that because your brother did it.
Yeah, he did the Plague Doctor.
Yeah, it's still hanging downstairs. I like that piece a lot.
We should throw it away. No, I'm kidding.
Throw it away. Yes, Matt.
So like when we do like the measurements, like on the portfolio, is that in pencil or in pen?
In pencil. Always pencil. Unless I have told you to start a drawing in pen, always pencil. Yeah, Mateo, I know you had a question.
Okay, so just to clarify, the thing, it's the graphite that's gonna be in the little box, right? That's you're taping down the graphite to it, and then.
Yeah, Carson.
For the tiling landscape, is it right off the corner of the middle logo?
So yes, if you want.
Okay.
So for instance, I can actually show you. So this one is tiled up in the corner here. So you see here's my middle one and here's the tiled box next to it. You'll notice that the two edges are not even. If you wanted, yeah, absolutely, Gio. If you wanted, you could adjust for that and make it so that it has an even border all the way around. The way you would do that would be different though. So you would start from this middle line and you would actually measure down and in. So you'd care about the edge measurements instead of the measurements on the inside. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
So if you were to do that instead of, so like when I put this on here, so here, I'll use this as an example here. When I put this on here, all I did was I was like, okay, I've got a finished 5x7 box in the middle. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and say, all right, well, I know these two marks are correct. So I'm going to measure down, I'm going to measure down the same number of inches. So, I mean, like I just took a measurement here. It was like, okay, it's 6 inches down. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to measure 6 inches down and make a mark and just draw a line across and make something from that. You wouldn't be doing that. What you would do is you would actually say, well, I want a 5x7 box that is centered up in the corner here. So what you would do is, so I can tell you right now that if you were to do that, this border is going to be a 1/2 inch. I can just tell you that it's how this portfolio lines up in size. So if you were going to do a 1/2 inch margin around the whole thing, what you would do is you would start here and you would actually measure a 1/2 inch in from this corner, come down to your middle line here, because this line wouldn't be here, and measure a 1/2 inch in from this. Then draw your line between them. So you have one border and your other border should already be drawn. Then you're going to measure down a 1/2 inch on here and down a 1/2 inch from this intersection as well, and draw your line here. And now from this measurement, you would draw your 5 inch line. So this line right now wouldn't be here. So you're going to make a 5 inch measurement there and a 5 inch measurement there, and then connect your lines across those. And that would actually give you, so if you notice, it's now, so this is the space. I'm just gonna, okay, so there's your space now. So you see there's now a 1/2 inch border that's actually padding all the way around it. So there's a 1/2 inch gap here. There's a 1/2 inch gap here, a 1/2 inch gap here, and a 1/2 inch gap here. If you wanted to tile it that way, it's a little more centered. I would be totally fine with that. It is a little more complicated in that you start your measurements from a different spot though, instead of going off the ones you already had. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, guys, any questions for me? Any more? Yes, my dear. Go ahead, Ben.
So could we like do a triangle instead of the tile where it's like one on the bottom left, the center, and one on the bottom right?
So if you were to go about doing that, you're still going to start. So if you wanted, you could move the centered one up for a triangle. So if you wanted it to be just a little bit higher, you could. You are obviously bounded by hitting the handle here. So if you wanted to be right below the handle, you could do that. You just need to take a measurement for it. And if you're going to do something like that, I want to see your measurements ahead of time. But so you could absolutely put one here and then one here and one here, or one way down here and one up here and one here. This is your oyster. You can decide how you wish to put them out. It's just a matter of whether or not they get more complicated according to where you put them, okay? No, let's see. Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. Everybody's here. That's 18 plus 4, including me. Okay, so. All right, I need everyone's cameras on just for a minute. I will let you turn them off, but I need some show of hands things. Okay, So how many people in here have a landscape format logo? Okay.
What does that mean?
Landscape means that the 7-inch direction is the bottom of the logo.
Oh.
Okay. And how many people have a portrait format one? So that way. Okay. I'm about half and half in class. A little more on the portrait. Okay. I'm just preparing myself for which direction I'm going to be doing this demo in. All right. So this is a little hard to do because I am actually going to be doing some small drawings to illustrate how to do the measurements for these. So I am going to say ahead of time that do not start this step until I have written on your Canvas submission that your logo is approved. You do not get to start this until I have approved your logo. Also, if for some reason you see this and you're like, holy shit, how am I going to do this? And you're a little just nervous about actually measuring, wait until you're actually in a class period with me. So next class period, we will just have a working period and you can ask me questions as this happens, because I think you'll see what I mean, that once you start this, it's not the easiest process. And I'm a total stickler about this. Ellis specifically can tell you that because he had to redo this back of his portfolio like what, 15 times your sophomore year? Something like that. It was a lot.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, and
you're terrible at measuring. Not anymore.
yeah, and it wasn't symmetrical. Like you have to do it 3 times, and it wasn't symmetrical at all for any of them. So I just kept erasing, and it kept getting worse. So.
And then it finally ended up looking really good. I loved it.
Yeah, it looked fine. I messed up the color a little bit, but I mean.
But that's different. But for the measuring part, you did have to redo this a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Okay, so guys, we are going to just talk a little bit about the dimensions of your portfolio here. So your portfolios are 17 inches by 22 inches. So when we look at them, there are 2 sides. There's the flat side and there's the flappy side. We are not using the flappy side. We are using the flat side. So obviously that means you're gonna have to contend with these little buttons that are on here and the handle. So if I wanted to start off with this, and I have redesigned this so you can do this entire thing with a 12-inch ruler and you don't need a 24-inch ruler. If I were to want to find the middle of the back of a portfolio, what do you think my first step would be?
Measure.
What would I measure though?
Not sure.
Measure the entire folder.
Yeah, so if we need to divide the whole back of it in half, what would be the first thing that I would do?
Measure the entire folder.
Okay, well, I know the dimensions of it.
Yeah,
so that's 17 by 22.
And then cut 22 in half.
Okay, so what's half of 22?
11, and then measure 11 in.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do is this corner that I know is straight, right? Because it's machine made, and we can, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to measure over to 11 inches and make a mark. Without flipping my ruler over, I'm going to come down to the bottom of the portfolio and measure over 11 inches and make a mark. Now I know this is going to involve a little bit of a guesstimate here, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm going to place my ruler as straight as I possibly can on this edge towards the middle. Doesn't need to be exactly centered, and measure over 11 inches. So none of this involves flipping my ruler around. It means that when I measure, you go like this, this, and this. So you don't move your ruler. So you're just going to move it across the portfolio. So once you have those 3 marks at 11 inches, you're going to take your ruler and connect this top mark to this middle mark and draw a line. And then you're going to connect this middle mark to this bottom mark and draw a line. So now we have a line that divides, and you're doing all of this in graphite. I am doing this, so you're doing this with pencil. I am doing this in Sharpie so you can see it. So now if I wanted to find half of the other dimension, what measurement would I be taking?
Half of 17.
What's half of 17?
8.5.
Perfect. All right, so now I'm going to measure down from the corner here, 8.5. And now I know this middle line is straight. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to measure down 8.5 And then I'm going to come over to this edge and measure down 8.5. So I'll use my ruler to connect those. So now I have a divided portfolio. So that means this space here is now 8.5 inches. And this space here is 11 inches. And so it's going to be the same on both of those. So how many of you are thinking that you might like one of your logos to be centered in the back of the portfolio? Okay, quite a few of you. All right, would anyone like to hazard a guess on how I would do that? It's very similar to what we just did. Okay, so most of you guys are landscape format, so I'm going to do this for landscape format. So if this is the middle and I want to center a box on that, the first thing I am going to do is I am going to center my 7-inch measurement on this line. So that means from the cross here, I'm going to measure out 3.5 inches. So I'm going to put my 3.5 inch mark right there because that's half of 7. And I'm going to measure out to the 7-inch mark and out to the 0 mark. So that'll give me a 7-inch, 2 marks that equal 7 inches on that line. I'm going to come to the top of the portfolio, and that line is going to go all the way to the top, right? So I'm going to make those same marks on the top at 0 and 7, and make those same marks at 0 and 7 on the bottom. Now I can go ahead and connect those lines with a ruler and draw them in pencil. And I will have a centered 7-inch block that runs down the portfolio. So you don't necessarily need to put your logo in the center. Any measurements that you wish to do with this, you can. They just need to be straight on the portfolio and have, straight line borders and all kinds of things. But, oh, sorry, I didn't move enough to keep my light going. Come on, light, there you go. Okay, so I now have a centered 7-inch bar. If I want to center my 5x7 off this, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to measure off this middle line, and I'm going to measure down 2.5 inches and up 2.5 inches. I'm then going to do the same thing on these other lines I've drawn because now I know that all of my lines are straight, and connect my 3 dots. And now we have a centered 5x7 box that can get filled. If you were to be doing this landscape format, it would be exactly the same, just with a slightly different set of measurements. So if this is my portfolio again, we've measured the 11 and the 8.5. So we have our division. If we wanted to make this a portrait format one, my measurement off of this middle part is going to only be 2.5 inches on either side, and 2.5 inches at the top, 2.5 inches at the bottom. So that I've got a narrower box. And now I would measure 3.5 inches down on all of these, and that would create my portrait format centered 7-inch box. Always measure both sides. Like, never shortcut this. Always measure both sides and never flip your ruler around. It allows it to be, if it's uneven in the same way when you do it that way. So if we were to take this, let's see. So who has a landscape format logo that wants one in the center? Just raise a hand. Okay, Zephyr, where else would you like to put these? Do you want one that's here and one that's here? Do you want them tiled diagonally across the middle? Do you want them all 3 in a row? Do you want them tiled in a triangle that way? What are you thinking?
All 3 in a row.
All 3 in a row. Do you want spaces between them or not? Or do you want me to show you both options?
Show me both.
Okay, so if you want all 3 straight across the middle, your job gets significantly easier. So we have these lines that tell us where everything is. So on this edge of the portfolio over here, I'm going to go ahead and measure down 2.5 inches and up 2.5 inches from that center line. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this edge over here. And we are going to just go ahead and connect those lines. So now we have this big plus sign on here, but all of those bars are the same height. So now I can tell you that this, like, let's see, you have, I'm trying to think, let's see, it's 7 inches. So 22 minus 7 is 15, and 15 and a half is 7.5, right? So you only have 7.5 inches on both sides here, which means that you don't have a lot of wiggle room. So you have to decide whether or not you want the extra 1/2 inch in here. So you can have a 1/2 inch border on this edge. So they're just going to tile directly across, and you can have a 1/2 inch border over here so that they're just going to be a whole bar of color that goes across the middle. Or you can decide to have the 1/2 inch gap here, and your logo will go all the way to the edge of the portfolio. And so you would have logo, gap, logo, gap, logo. Or you can have it where it's just a bar of logo, logo, logo with little gaps on the edges. So anyone else have a different landscape format one that they would like to, instead of just the bars across the middle? I know Arturo, Arturo or Matt? I know I'm looking at a screen that's kind of, which of the two of you had a landscape one that you want one centered? Matt, all right. So Matt, do you want, so where would you put your other boxes?
What do you mean? Like all 4 around?
Well, you have to copy this on here 3 times. So you want one centered, correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so we know where that first one's going. We know it goes right here. So that's your first box. Where else would you like them to be? Do you want them to go corner to corner and tile across here? Do you want them to be a triangle shape?
I could do that. I could do corners.
Okay, so if you want to go corner to corner. So first of all, you can go either this way or this way. It doesn't matter, but the measurements will be the same for those. So I'm going to do, since I'm doing this upside down, I'm going to do the one that's easier to see. So if you want them to go corner to corner, luckily we have a bunch of measurements on here already. So from here, we know that this is 3.5 inches down. So from this middle line over here, I'm going to go ahead and make a mark at 3.5 inches and draw a line across. And now from here, very simply, I'm just going to make a measurement down from this corner right here, 5 inches. And I'm going to do the same thing from this line here. I'm going to make a measurement down 5 inches and draw a line across. You're going to end up with a slightly larger than 1/2 inch border. And then I'm going to make a mark at 7 here and a mark at 7 here and draw my line across. And now I have another box that I can put my logo in, and it will have borders accordingly. Same thing will happen up here. I would come over here, make a mark at 3.5 inches up, draw my line across, make a mark at 7, make a mark at 7, draw my line down, and then make a mark up at 5 and a mark up at 5 and draw my line across. And there we have, oh, damn it. I don't move enough doing this demo. And there we have 3 boxes that can be filled with your logo. So if you wanted to do something similar, do I have any portrait format people who want to tile them? Okay, I don't. Do I have any portrait format people who want all 3 just across the middle centered? Okay, Chad. All right. So to do this, it's a little different because it's going to require an extra step. So now,
actually,
go ahead, Chad.
Do I have to now?
What?
Do I have to decide now, like how I want it?
No. I'm using these as hypotheticals, honey.
Oh,
it's just things. Okay, yeah. It's just things you can think about because there are different ways to go about doing this. I will be posting this video, so I'm not going to ask you guys to just fly blind after this.
Okay, I'll see how it is, like just across.
Okay, all 3 across. So if I were doing this, I would center them. So in this case, we have 11, so this is 11 inches, and we're going to subtract 2.5. So that is 8.5, right? Yes, that's 8.5. Okay, so this, from this edge over right now is 8.5 inches. So in order to find the middle of that, what is half of 8.5?
4.25.
There you go. All right, so on this center line, I'm gonna make a mark at 4.25, and I'm gonna measure out from this one too and make a mark at 4.25. I'm gonna do the same thing from this line over on the top and on the bottom, because I have this lovely line that I have drawn on the edges of my portfolio that's gonna allow me to do all of these measurements. So now I can go ahead and draw lines between all of those. So now I have 2 more lines that are centered on the edges of the portfolio. At this point, you guys are really lucky because you have this middle one in here. So we have this middle line. I'm gonna go ahead and measure down my 3.5 inches and up my 3.5 inches and do that on both sides. Connect my lines all the way across. So now I've got a nice bar here down the middle that's even. And all you have to do at this point is get your 5-inch measurement centered. So I have these middle lines here. I'm going to measure 2.5 inches out from each of those on both sides and connect my lines. And now I have 3 centered 5x7 boxes across the back of the portfolio.
All right, I got cake.
Yeah, and it's okay, honey. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Measuring is always something I will say, take it slow, but I promise you will get it. So in order to see me do this on an actual portfolio, I do have one. There's some marks on it, but I am going to center a box on it so you can see me do this. So I'm going to pretend that my 24-inch ruler is actually only a 12-inch ruler. So I'm going to do this as though I'm using the same tools you will be doing. So here is the back of the portfolio. I'm going to just flip my little handle there, down there for now, and I'm going to measure over 11 inches. So once I have measured over 11 inches, I'm going to make a mark at 11. I'm going to come down. You notice I am just sliding my ruler top to bottom. Come down to the bottom and make a mark at 11 inches. I'm going to come to the rough middle of the portfolio. I mean, in this case, I have a mark right now, so I know where it is, but I'm just going to guess. And I'm going to make another mark at 11. I'll connect all 3 of those marks and go ahead and draw a line between them. So now I have that first center mark. Now I'm going to get my 8.5 marks in. So in this case, this is easy because I already have a centered line down the middle. So I am going to put my ruler 0 and then 8.5 at the top, make a mark, come to my middle line, do the same thing, make a mark, and come over to my edge. And you notice I am not flipping my ruler around, I'm just scooting it over and make a mark. So now I can go ahead and take my ruler between this mark and the edge, line them up, and draw a line. And I can do the same thing over here. And we now have a straight cross line that goes through the entire thing. So in this case, I have a landscape format one drawn on here. But in order to do that, what I did is I used this middle cross and I put my 2.5-inch mark right at the middle. So you notice I'm laying my 2.5, which is half of 5, at the middle cross. I made a mark at 0 and a mark at 5. I then came down to the bottom of the portfolio using that same center line, made a mark at 0 and a mark at 5. And then I came to the top of the portfolio and did exactly the same thing. So a mark at 0 and a mark at 5. In this case, because it's centered, I didn't try and draw through this. I just used that I have a mark there. So I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler from this center line, connect that mark. I'm going to move the handle over here a little bit. Connect that mark to my top mark and just draw a line as far up as I can, which hits the button here. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So I'm just getting it nice lined up and I'm coming right up to the handle. You will still have this mark as a reference though. I'm going to do the same thing top to bottom here. Draw my line between the two and draw my line between the two here. So I now have just these edge bars that tell me how big it is. So now if I need it to be 7 inches top to bottom, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines that I can use as a reference. So I know my lines are straight. I have faith in myself. So now all I have to do is take the 3.5 inch mark on my ruler and line it up with that center line and make a mark at 0 and a mark at 7. I'm going to come over to my other straight line and do the exact same thing. Make a mark at 0 and make a mark at 7. Then you just simply connect your marks, hold your ruler and draw a straight line between them and do the same thing up top. So whenever you are doing this, you will notice that I'm always double checking my measurements. I am never flipping my ruler around. I am always measuring as many points that I know are straight. Do not guess. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. Do not guess. Because I will be able to tell. And also, it's so frustrating if you make something and then the lines aren't straight. So in this case, I now have my centered box on here. But I bet y'all are wondering, why in God's name are we doing this? And how then are we going to make this into where your logo goes? So this one has pen on the back, just so it's a little easier for you guys to see. So in this case, I have centered 2 top to bottom over here that are the portrait format. And then I also have a landscape one in the middle, as well as a tiled landscape one up here. So any measurements that you want to do that are strange, you are welcome to. You can put 1, 2, and 3. You can put 3 across the middle. You can do 3 tiled, 3 up to the right. You can do triangles this direction. You can do triangles this direction. Like, there are any number of these where you can decide that your logo wants to be on here. You could even decide that you want them to be flush with the edge of the portfolio. You just need a plan ahead of time. But once you have it all planned out and your lines are drawn here on here in pencil, not in pen, this is just for visual purposes, we are going to transfer our logos. So I know I showed you how to do this before, and I will show you again before we actually get to it, but we are going to make some graphite paper. So I'm just using this so I'm not drawing on my other stuff. Okay, so I have a piece of computer paper here, and I have been using this as a transfer sheet. So what I've done is I've gone and used the corner of it. So I know that the machined edge of the page here is straight. So I'm going to take my graphite stick and I am going to coat a section of this in graphite. So I've already coated this in graphite a couple of times, so it's nice and graphite-y. But I'm going to go ahead and take that, and I want to put a logo in this middle box here. So in order to do that, you have Scotch tape in your portfolio. You want to press extremely lightly with this, but I am going to take my graphite edged corner and line it up with the edges here. So I'm lining it up with my drawn lines. And I'm very lightly going to put a piece of tape down and tack tape that. Very lightly. You do not want to rip your portfolio when your tape comes up. So I have my graphite piece that is now down there. So we're going to pretend that this is a finished logo, even though it's not. And so I have taken my finished logo out of my sketchbook. I've ripped off that little perforated edge. So to do that, you just fold it over and rip it off nicely. It'll rip really well. And then I have cut around the other edges so that I have a 5x7 piece of paper here. So in order to transfer this into the box, I am going to take the edge of my logo and line it up again with these lines that I've drawn. So it's nice and centered and nice and straight. And I am going to gently tack tape it down. So it is gently tack taped down so it won't move. So you can use either a pen or a pencil for this step. A lot of people like using pen because it's a little easier to see. And I'm just going to transfer one little piece of this. But what you do is you now push really hard and go over your original drawing. And I'm really pushing on this. Like you can really bear down on this. And if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal because it's actually very, very easy to erase the graphite that transfers down underneath this. Okay, so I went over my big circle. And now I am going to go over my little circles. Okay. So I went over those guys, and now I'm going to peel the entire thing up, and voila, there is an exact copy of what I just went over. So you will be tracing over it 3 times, but you basically get to use your own drawing over and over again with a way of exactly replicating it all 3 times into the boxes. But let's say I did screw that up and maybe it wasn't like perfectly centered, or I didn't like the way something came out, or like, you know, I have a spot on here that I can tell I drew kind of a funky line. At this stage, it erases really easily. And it's because you are basically just transferring graphite off the back of another page onto something. So it comes up really simply. So if you intend to use this same page over and over and over again, every time you do a transfer, you need to put new graphite onto the back. It is basically just taking graphite off the back of this and pressing it onto the page. Everyone with me? Okay, any questions for me? Yeah, Jake.
We're making these marks on the back of the portfolio with the Sharpie. No?
Pencil.
Pencil. Okay.
Only pencil. I am only using Sharpie so you can see it.
Okay.
Dog hair in my coffee. Anyone else? Questions? Okay, anyone have some crazy hypothetical measurement that they would like me to figure out for them? All right, then that is it from me for today, guys. You are welcome to pick my brain if you want, but otherwise I'm going to let you go. Thank you for, I think you're my artistic class out of the 4 design classes. So I'm not super worried about you guys actually, but if you find this totally daunting and confusing, don't attempt it until we actually have class time to do it. And I haven't officially approved anyone's logo yet, so please do not start this as of now. I just wanted to get the demo out of the way so you can see where we're going, so that when we actually start on it, you have a foundation. I will also be posting the video for you, so that the video will go up, and I'm actually thinking I may download and clip all 3 of them together so you can actually see what I did